Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. We have a brand new episode here. My name is Jeff Waldman. I am your host, and this podcast is all about HR tech, talent, and then everything about the world of work. And I'm also the founder of Scale HR, and we focus solely on skills development of leadership teams and also HR teams. So we have a fantastic topic today, and we've called it From Workforce to Careforce, how employers are addressing caregiving needs. So obviously across the world, this is a huge issue, and it's probably getting more of an issue with each passing day. And we've got an excellent guest here, and I'll bring her on in just a few minutes. But I just want to just point out that this podcast lives on our YouTube channel, also on our website at goscalehr.com. So if you're not already a subscriber to our YouTube channel, please do so you'll be notified of new videos being dropped every week, typically on Thursday morning. Without further ado, I just want to point out, just a couple of things first, on this topic about caregiving. And it's pretty interesting. So when we were sort of planning out this episode, there's a staggering 606 million working age women worldwide are not working due to caregiving responsibilities, resulting in a loss of $9 trillion in GDP. That's staggering. So just think about it. This highlights the significant impact caregiving has on your workforce participation and economic productivity. And I'm sure if we break that down even further, you'll see differences, in countries and so forth around the world. But that is a absolutely staggering stat. And if you want to get into Canada alone, there's about 1.3 million individuals. So 3% of our population roughly are providing care to family members, ranging from children to aging parents. This sandwiched generation, those simultaneously caring for children and aging parents, is a critical demographic for our workplaces to pay attention to. And additionally, the rise of young caregivers underscores the inefficiencies in our healthcare system and the need for comprehensive support structures. So there was a lot said there, and obviously it's a major issue right now. And in HR, this is even more so. And so I really want to sort of break all of this down with our guest today, Cindy Diogo. We've been longtime contacts. We've never actually spoken in person, which is strange. But Cindy, I want to welcome you to the Unmuted Podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you and meet you kind of formally now too, even though we've been in and around the same networks for quite a long time.
As we talked about, so when we were organizing this podcast episode, I mean, the world's pretty small, right? So obviously, all of us are connected somehow. Before we dive into this topic, can you just give our audience just a bit of an overview of what you do? Your sort of focus in work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did spend about almost 2 decades, and I always start off by saying that ages me. So I've spent almost 2 decades in and around talent acquisition and HR. A lot of my experiences in the past have been around finding talent, retaining talent in really competitive markets like technology, and really thinking about employer branding and how do we do that accurately. And of course, in the last couple of years, really focusing on initiatives within DEIB and partnerships to ensure that we have really diverse and inclusive workplaces. So aside from that, of course, I'm the co-founder of a platform called ConSoul, which is really on a mission to support caregiving employees, so those who are working, but also provide some form of care outside of the workplace. So again, anywhere from children to, of course, this aging demographic.
So that's awesome. I mean, and so we're going to dive into ConSoul shortly, because that's actually really interesting, and that ties into our topic here. But I wanted to ask you, so let's just really dive into the topic here because I think it's a really important one. What are some practical ways employers can support the employees, who are also caregivers beyond just sort of implementing tools or solutions? Because oftentimes, companies will say, "Hey, we have a program," and it's sort of like almost like a tick box exercise. It might be like a one-off here, one-off there, or it doesn't really address sort of what they're asking for. So maybe talk about some of those practical methods.
Absolutely. And so I want to bring back the notion that we talked about, and you mentioned that there's 606 million working age women that are not currently in the workforce because of these work responsibilities outside of the home for caregiving. And so in terms of practicality, the pandemic was a really good use case for a lot of the different tips and things that we can implement that support working aged women who are providing care. And I want to also note before I kind of dive into the tips that caregiving is also universal. So we do speak primarily on women and the work of women because, of course, there are 60% of the people who are providing care are primarily women. But caregiving is universal. It doesn't just impact women's careers. Everybody has parents, and so this also impacts men as well. So when we think about the practical tips and things that we can do to really support caregiving employees, we think about things like flexible work arrangements. So the ability to work at home, even in a capacity of hybrid. And I know this is a really heated topic in the last couple of years, but providing that opportunity for that flexibility and that hybrid type of even hybrid type of work doesn't necessarily have to be 100% remote, really does give the opportunity of that flexibility. So having to take, children to school, having to take parents to appointments that are usually during working hours is one way. Telecommuting and flexible hours is also something to implement without having to bring in particular tools or technologies. Something that's starting to really make headway is talking about job sharing arrangements as well. So often women who are at a certain age in their career, even if they've decided not to have children, who are having responsibilities to take care of aging parents, offering that ability to really stay in the workplace, but perhaps condense it and share the job is really making an impact within the workplace as well.
It's really interesting because, you mentioned job sharing. Job sharing's been around for a long time. It's been around for years, decades, actually. But I think its use case has started to come back. And so what I heard from you really is about flexibility. I think that is the general theme. It's not just talking about this topic, but, pretty much every aspect of work is around extreme flexibility. So it's really interesting that you also talk about that as well. How can organizations ensure that their policies and benefits effectively support caregivers of all ages and backgrounds?
Yeah, so absolutely. And I put back my, HR and TA hat. And it really comes down to it's nothing novel, but again, it's really just practical advice as well. You really want to start with, assessing your benefits and policies. And this may involve just initially soliciting feedback from your employees. So, as the world started to change and we started to think about working aged women from a sense of they were deciding to have children, and we started to implement things like, fertility benefits and that flexibility and benefits for working parents. Really, it starts with listening to your employees and understanding where's the demographic shifting and what are the types of benefits that could impact them and really make sure that you're retaining your talent. So conducting surveys is something I always call these the cheap and cheerfuls. So you don't necessarily have to implement any particular tools that are quite costly. And I know the last couple of years, HR has been asked to do a lot with very little and no budgets. So I totally get it. But, conversations, conducting surveys, focus groups, and then also benchmarking against the industry for best practices. What we're introducing in the workplace is something that's starting to shift shift the workplace. So of course, right now, it might be not necessarily top of mind to start thinking about, the aging population and how that's impacting your working employees. But the shift is coming. And of course, with our healthcare system so inundated, it's going to only exacerbate the need for these type of tools. But, flexibility is key. And really just ensuring that you're understanding and listening to, people's personal circumstances, and then really taking a survey impulse of what are those types of things that you can implement, and listening to your employees.
Yeah, and you obviously have, I mean, all of us have some sort of personal, circumstance that sort of, influences how you sort of shift in your career. That you sort of went through, your own personal experience with caregiving. So how did that experience inspire you to create ConSoul? I mean, it's obviously, it's a very specific platform. And then what are the specific needs does the platform actually address?
Yeah, absolutely. And so our mission really started, myself and my co-founder, who happens to be my sister-in-law, with our experiences in caregiving. And so I have been a caregiver on both ends. So of course, I am part of the sandwich generation. My career had taken a little bit of an impact when I decided to have my first child and stepping out of the workplace. And then, fast forward into my father being really terminally ill and having those experiences of really supporting, and seeing the lack of, support for caregivers, and especially the lack of focus on their mental health and wellness as well. My sister-in-law, unfortunately, during the pandemic, did face an instance where she had just gotten married, and 6 months after, her husband was diagnosed with terminal colon cancer. And so this really exacerbated that need to provide the support, but we really physically couldn't because, of course, of the pandemic. So with these particular instances of caregiving, and then my experiences in talent acquisition and in HR, really started this mission and really passion of ours to support, primarily females in the workplace who are taking these times off of their career to provide support and, in this capacity. But really universally, again, this does impact not just women's careers. So really, that was our mission and really the why of why we're doing what we're doing, these, deeply personal experiences. What we have created in ConSoul is really focusing on the how, when people ask, how can I help? They often don't know how to help, which burdens the caregiver. So the platform itself is, similar to a very loose EAP. It focuses on the wellness of the caregiver. So taking a lot of tangible tasks off of their plate, triaging the support with what we call their digital village, their family and friends who want to take a lot of the burden of those tangible things off of their plate, but really primarily focusing on checking in on the mental health and the wellness of that caregiver to ensure that they're not burned out. So there was this really interesting Harvard study that has been conducted in the last couple of years with a similar tool in the US, of course, very different healthcare system, that did just prove the ROI of these type of tools and really focusing on mental health and wellness, which is a huge topic in HR, in promoting productivity, in decreasing burnout, and of course, helping with retention and attraction. Focusing on health and wellness and really what I call the whole person is really such an attractive benefit in the workplace as well. So that's really the functionality of the platform.
That's fantastic. And then we'll also share the popular links with our audience as well as to how they can get a hold of you and ConSoul. And so I want to shift just a little bit here, because obviously this is a massively changing area of work, and obviously based on the demographics. And so are there any specific trends or development in the caregiving space that employers might be aware of, and then how can they adapt, to those new trends, to meet the changing needs of the workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that we do in raising awareness, outside of the platform is really awareness and recognition. So some of the things that we do is at a manager level. So similar to DEIB, and when we started to think about how do we really build diverse and inclusive workplaces, it really starts with training the people that are responsible for the people in the workplace. So your line managers, your hiring managers. So increased awareness and the recognition perception of your employees as these whole people that are not just, Bob in finance, but, a person outside of the workplace that has all these additional needs is one of the things that we really are starting to see. Raising that awareness of how do I really start to lead and accommodate for the whole person inside of the workplace. So that increased awareness and that training around how do we do that in the right way, really authentically in the workplace is something that we're seeing. Of course, we've talked about this a lot, the moving towards how do we really do these flexible work arrangements and accommodations, really now more than ever. And, I think about, specifically talent in the Canadian market and within technology, it's such an aggressive and competitive market. And so offering these different types of solutions and offering these accommodations and flexible work arrangements is what we are and have been, talking about since, the start of the pandemic and even before. And of course, employee assistance programs and taking those to the next level is a trend that we've been seeing. So not just, the standard paramedicals, but really thinking about, what does wellness look like and what we can offer outside of just, your dental and your medical, but thinking about, mental health and wellness has been such a big topic as well. And of course, lastly, technology solutions. So very last, of course, thinking about things like, different EAPs, the things like Dialogue and League also have been kind of on the rise. And how can we do that well in the workplace?
Yeah, and I think it's also really important just to sort of maintain that flexible mindset, because obviously, things have changed. But I mean, like even if you were to sort of strip away the pandemic, demographics have changed obviously in our workforce, and I think it's really important that the employers, stop taking a cookie cutter approach to and really get to know, their employees. And so, okay, so I just want to just kind of wrap it all up. But what is one thing, if viewers can take just one thing away from anything that you've said today, so what would that be?
I think the biggest thing to be aware of is that this is definitely coming. This is definitely a global issue. So the aging population continues to age and we're having less children. So of course the reliance on the sandwich generation and the people that are predominantly, your workforce now really will need that support in the workplace. And so I think the one big thing is just to really have an opportunity to be authentic and have the conversations with your employees. I know I'm simplifying it, and these are really big topics and flexibility and culture, but the ability to really listen to your employees and implement solutions that don't necessarily have to be really quite costly, but just really starting to listen to what their needs are and then accommodating for that is probably the biggest thing to take away.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cindy. I appreciate that. I mean, I think, one of the things, just to wrap up here, people, like always ask me, so how do I do something? Or how do I start something? And I think a really good place in this context here is if you do want to learn more about, supporting those employees of yours, actually caregiving for whether it be children or elders, that you can also go to free resources, which is the AARP or the Family Caregiver Alliance. Don't worry, we'll share both of those links below. And I just want to also just point out too that doing something is not a tick box exercise that people think it might be, and I think that's sort of easier said than done. But it's also, it's really about genuinely caring for the well-being of your workforce. And I think if anything during the last 4 years that we've learned with what's happening with our mental health and burnout and so on, I think that's even more important than ever. And so by doing something like that, by actually genuinely caring, actually benefits our employees. You all know this. It benefits our employees and then ultimately benefits our companies as a whole. And so, Cindy, I just want to thank you for being here, sharing your story. It's great to have you on the show. And then don't forget, for our viewers, if you haven't done already, please like our videos, provide comment. You want to hear from you, obviously, just to share your thoughts, on these, really important topics. And then obviously hit the, subscribe button, smash that button so that you can get, notification of when a new, episode is dropped, which is every week on Thursday. So Cindy, thanks for being here and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lovely conversation.